money on a bet. Gold crocodiles, they snap their teeth on your cigarette. Foreign types with the hookah pipe say, walk like an Egyptian.
Hey everybody, it's Zach again at newtutorial.com. I want to come in and do a video for you today. I want to start out with a Bible verse today. And so we're going to open up the Bible and we're going to go to Exodus chapter 11, verse 4. And Moses said, "Thus saith the Lord, about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beast. And there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall be like it any more. But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue, against man or beast, that ye may know how the Lord doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel." So, this is back in December, late December. It's now, February, so we just got done with January. And back at the end of December, there was an article that came out on how Brigham Young University, the Mormon university, a study team from that university was working in Egypt, and they discovered what they called 1 million mummies, a burial plot with 1 million mummies in it, estimated. And the reason they estimated it that way is that they took a 5x5 square foot area and they counted 40 bodies in a 5x5 square. It's a pretty small area, 40 bodies in one area. And then they measured basically the size of the cemetery, the area where they found bodies, from different 5x5 areas. And over the course of 28 years, folks, 28 years of study of this area, taking samples and digging up bodies within this area of these, from each of this area, 5x5 squares, and discovering around 40 bodies each, they estimated over what he said. What the director said, over 1 million bodies buried in this gravesite. Now, none of this, what I'm about to tell you, was mentioned in any of the articles, and I think that was for a reason. Most of the articles were published by, obviously, secular news sources to begin with, and most of Christianity just turned a blind eye, at least the ones that I have seen. If you have seen somewhere on the internet anyone publish what I'm about to tell you, or what I'm about to tell you is my hypothesis on the whole issue, please let me know, because I haven't seen it. And so I'm going there and I'm reading this and I'm seeing 1 million bodies, and we're just going through the Torah portion of, we're getting ready to go into the Exodus of the Torah portion for the Torah cycle, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm reading the article, right? Let's just go back up. The article says that there were rich, there were poor. The original articles stated from the director from BYU said rich and poor, old and young. There was really no pattern to the burials at all. Most of these were not mummified completely, and so that's one of the reasons they said these aren't even mummies. But they said that they didn't have the correct embalming methods used on a lot of these bodies, and so everything. And they even said, I think, in one of the articles that it spoke of a very quick burial for these people, or a very quick mass die-off for a lot of people. And a number of articles and the director suggested plague may have come through and killed a whole bunch of people really quickly. And so, where did the people come from? Well, I have an idea. I'm reading my Bible, I'm reading my Torah portion, right? And I'm seeing, what it says. And, if Egypt is as big as it is, and we're looking at, the Bible as being truth, and we're looking at what secular media reports to us, and we can kind of put the pieces together here. The problem was, and there's a lot of things about the story you may not know, but we're going to go through some of them. So you had the story that came out, and a lot of details that were put up were, I guess, kind of shuffled under. They didn't really talk about a lot of stuff, and a lot of people came out later and said, well, the story's debunked. And the reason the story is debunked is because the Egyptian ministry that handles antiquities and these dig sites and all this stuff has revoked the permit for BYU to operate in the area. After 28 years of study, BYU got its license and permit revoked by the Egyptians. And so why was that? What happened? Well, they said it was because of, inaccuracy in reporting that these were mummies and these were not mummies. And the bodies weren't millions. There wasn't 1 million people there. There was only maybe 1,000 people and a bunch of bones. And so that's their official statement that they came out with a little while later. And you can find all these statements on YouTube, or I'm sorry, on Google, by searching for mummies discovered in Egypt, permit revoked. And so that's what they said. They said that, this is a bad reporting. BYU did not do its, there was not 1 million people there. There was only 1,000, a lot of bones. And BYU did a horrible job of reporting. And so we're revoking their permit and license to be digging there. And so Egypt has been very famous in the past for being very closed off to anything that may prove a biblical exodus from its territory. Okay, so if something is discovered in Egypt that supports the account of the Bible in Genesis or Exodus as being accurate, they will back off, or they will close up shop. They will deny and everything. It's something that they have done a number of times over the years, and you can find many examples of this. And so here we have BYU, a Mormon university, by the way, that has a director by the name of Molstein, which I don't know for certain, but I mean, it's a pretty Jewish-sounding name. And they're discovering 1 million bodies being buried in haste 60 miles south of Cairo. 60 miles south of Cairo. Okay, so you look at Cairo on a map. Cairo is at the very bottom portion of where the delta of the Nile starts. Okay, the delta goes north up into the Med, and it's a very broad region where the delta is up there. And so Cairo basically sits at Giza where the delta starts, and then 60 miles or so, they won't tell you exactly where it is, but 60 miles or so south of Cairo is where all these bodies are buried. And so is it possible that the biblical account, or this upholds the biblical account? I think it is. I think it's absolutely possible. And I think it leans more credence to it that the Egyptians have acted the way they did. No one has suggested in any of the articles I've read or I've seen from the director or otherwise that this is Bible related. In fact, they say that these bodies were dated back to 1,500 years. 1,500 years ago, they say. It doesn't even get back 2,000 years. They go back, it's only 1,500 years. So, the time of the Exodus would have been like 3,500 years ago, or 3,300 years ago, depending on who you ask. And so it can't be that. No, they're only dated 1,500 years ago. Well, how did they date them? I haven't found one article that says how they dated them. Are they dating by carbon dating? Because in my opinion, carbon dating holds no water. Carbon dating is easily flawed. You can find study after study after study after study after study all over the internet about how carbon dating is flawed and doesn't work. So, are they using carbon dating to prove that? The pyramid, which is in the area, there's a small pyramid in the area, and that's dated 4,500 years ago. Well, usually they date the pyramids by what dynasty has got their hieroglyphics on them and engraved on them. So there's a pyramid in the area that's dated back to 4,500 years ago. See, there's this thing when you try to date something, and I think the best way to date something is having what's called a limiting factor. Let's just give you an example. Like when a ship goes down, say a ship sank off the coast of Florida. St. Augustine is really well known for having sunken ships and sunken treasure off the coast of Florida there. St. Augustine, a ship goes down 200 years ago. It's got Spanish gold on it. And so divers, modern divers have discovered the ship, and they're trying to determine when did the ship go down. Well, they look for what's called a limiting factor. Let's just say they find a chest of gold coins, and all the gold coins have a date on them. They probably don't, but let's just say they do because that's what our modern currency has on it. They have dates on them, and so they look for a coin that has the earliest date, or where archaeology and history tells us when was the earliest and latest coin minted that's in the pot. And what you do is you find the latest coin minted in the pot. And if it's like, let's say it's 1801 is the latest, or I'm sorry, the newest coin in the pot. That becomes your limiting factor because that coin, that ship had to go down after the coin was minted. And so it gives you a good date, a good estimate on a date of when the ship could have gone down. And that's called a limiting factor. And so, is there a limiting factor to dating these mummies back to 1,500 years? They don't tell you in the article. In fact, Brigham Young University, other than what the statement they gave when they made the statement for the discovery, has been completely tight-lipped about this because they're very upset over losing the permit process to begin with from the Egyptians. And to be honest, if I'm going to speculate and just do a little bit of brainstorming and trying to understand, maybe the ins and outs of this, because there's stuff we're not seeing behind the scenes, I think probably they knew they were going to lose their permit because they knew this find backed up the story of the Bible, the account the Bible gives of the Exodus. 1 million people buried in a small space outside of the largest metropolitan area back when Moses walked the earth. Is it possible? I don't know. I'm just saying maybe it's probable. I don't know, but it's very sketchy. And so 1 million bodies found. And let me give you another piece of information that I found. In the article, it was very interesting that they said they found a man who was over 7 foot tall. Now, the biblical account tells us that there were giants in the land north of Canaan. Let me just go to that Bible verse real quick. Exodus 13, verse 17. And it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, and they return to Egypt. So we know the land of Canaan, the Philistines land, the promised land is very close. And if you look north of the Delta, it's not that far. I mean, that's why there's border tensions right now, and it always has been for, in recent history between Egypt and Israel, because it's so close. It's a stone's throw away, basically. And when I was in the military, we even got orders one time to go to Sinai as a detachment, because there are U.S. troops, or at least there were U.S. troops for a while. They're on the Sinai border between Egypt and Israel as a UN peacekeeping mission. But anyway, so what you have here is it's saying that this was near. Canaan was very close. And we know from later accounts in the Torah that these giants were there because the people were afraid of the giants in the land. So if we have a giant buried amongst all these people who died, I mean, if there are giants over in Canaan, which isn't that far away, there's probably giants in Egypt too. Egypt was the superpower of the day. They had conquered a number of people groups. And so there are probably giants there with, the regular people. And so we find one mentioned in this article who the director, Molstein, said was over 7 foot tall. Well, my question then is how much over 7 foot was he? And number two, was there more than one? Because, they can't, it's against modern day science thinking to admit that there were giants in the land, because that goes along with biblical thinking. And science just doesn't do that. You don't agree with the Bible. It's the number one rule in science. And so they mentioned the 7 foot tall guy, and immediately my ears perked up because I know throughout history there have been giants in the land. There were giants in the land in those days and after. And so, where'd this giant come from? To me, it's obvious what this is. 1 million bodies buried south of Cairo, where Giza is. I mean, that's the main metropolitan area that would have been in place during the time of the Exodus. Okay, if you're going to get rid of 1 million bodies, you got to take them out that way somewhere and bury them. A whole bunch of them. It probably took them, a long time to get rid of the dead. But they had to get rid of them, and they had to get rid of them fast. And you can't just, the infrastructure is not in place to properly embalm that many people. And so they would be buried hastily. And this is what is reported in these articles. And so I'm making the connection. That these million mummies is the result of God's judgment on Egypt and Pharaoh's hardened heart. That's what I'm suggesting. Call me crazy. I'm just saying I'm just saying it's possible. That's all I'm saying. All right, we'll leave it at that. Go home, read your Bible. Thanks.